See more people joining, it's good. Hopefully there'll be more and more people joining while I'll discuss simple things. So first of all, hello. I would like to welcome everyone to our webinar, Navigating the APAC Threat Landscape. This time it's an online session, but we would like to make it hybrid in the future. So hopefully we'll meet with some of you and there'll be some snacks and beers next time in one of the major cities in Australia. We want this to be more conversational, and so please feel free to ask questions after our presenters finish their talk. We use Zoom today. Once you joined, you are on mute, but you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. So let me introduce our speakers today. We have Ryann Lofamia here. He's the head of cybersecurity practice in one of the MSSP providers in Australia. Please support his new vlog on YouTube and his new podcast on Spotify and other platforms, where he interviews people from our cyber industry and discusses practical topics. Another speaker today is Alexander Gould, a CTI expert from one of the big consultancy firms. Please note that this event is informal and the speakers are participating in a personal capacity. They're not representing their employers, and the opinions and views expressed are solely their own. Nothing shared should be considered as official statements or positions of their respective organizations. That was specifically for Alexander and others as well. We also have Paolo Prodi, CTO and co-founder of Priam, who previously worked as a senior data scientist at Fortinet, a security ML engineer at Microsoft, and of course, he's an expert in cyber threat intelligence. Let me also introduce Anna, our business development director at APAC Cloud. She is the main person who organized this event today and made it possible. So thank you very much, Anna, for this work.
My pleasure.
And myself, my name is Yury Sergeev. I used to work as a director at the Deloitte Cyber Intelligence Center in Sydney, where I managed the engineering function. Now I'm leading a threat intelligence company from Australia called APAC Cloud. So now it's time to begin. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see it? All good?
Yeah.
Okay, let me
Yep,
start
we can
with
see
a few highlights on the current threat landscape from the APAC region. So the APAC region is huge. There are so many countries with different strategic goals and various capabilities. So the first thing I believe is that it's hard to talk about APAC as about one consolidated entity. However, I will try to highlight some similar trends we can see here. So first of all, we all hear a lot about threat actors from Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, who are targeting different sectors across different countries. However, there are not the only ones. I would like to highlight that there are around 20 groups likely supported by different other governments in such countries as India, Pakistan, Vietnam, and South Korea. So wherever it is political reasons, the need to perform intelligence collection, support government operations and narratives, or the need to get some crypto money to overcome sanctions and fuel the economy through cybercrime, as it happens with some groups from North Korea, we have quite a complex environment here. And the situation is worse as we look at all the financial motivated actors here. So while the main targets are still in the US, UK, and the European Union, we have wealth countries such as Australia, New Zealand, and Japan being targeted quite often. However, by looking at the numbers of other of the attacks and the kind of digitalization process and the development of economies in other APAC countries, I think the new leader is actually India now. And more and more attacks happening in such countries as Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and so on. So we'll be skipping hacktivism and information warfare here, focusing on kind of cyber threats. So fortunately, there's a lot of information is now publicly available, thanks to all the researchers sharing their reports and articles on various threat actors, campaigns, malware, tools, and techniques. Here I'm listing my top 50 sources that you may want to subscribe to or use automated report processing tools to collect data from. So these are all about APAC, writing from time to time about the APAC region. Here you can see that according to APAC Cloud statistics, about 15 reports related to our region are published online each week. and this is a view per country. So if you're interested in a certain country statistics, feel free to reach out. In the end, there's some research available related to almost any country. So there's no problem to find information on any country of your interest. There have been many significant events, but I want to share a few here. One case is Indonesia is particularly interesting. Due to negligent password management and the absence of backups, I believe the entire data center was encrypted, impacting almost all citizens of the country. The scale of this attack was so alarming that even the attackers decided to back off. They apologized and returned the decryption keys. After all, you wouldn't want the entire nation coming after you. Another breach occurred at Telekom Malaysia, affecting 20 million customers. That was not the first one. And there was no apology in this case, but despite, still there were a lot of people impacted. Third case was a kind of global issue, but I think it's important to mention it because amongst the 160-ish customers affected, there were clients from APAC region, including Australia. And in many of these cases, the breach was made possible through credentials obtained by threat actors from stealer logs. So this just emphasizes one more time how stealers have become vital tools for adversaries. So lastly, an interesting development involves Intellex and NSO Group. These are the companies originally from Israel. They have not previously been associated with Russian Foreign Intelligence Services, and looks like because APT-29 was able to spy on Mongolian government for 2 years using the tools from this produced by these companies, it looks like this recent US sanctions could be related. Anyway, it's notable to mention. The initial attack vectors are quite common across all regions, and in the APAC region, though, we have a lot of devices connected directly to the internet that become an easy target for network exploits. Also, this year there were so many RCE vulnerabilities against remote access solutions and also web applications that it contributed a lot to pushing these TTPs up. Another issue is that the threat actors have cheap access to stolen credentials. Many people reuse their passwords and usernames across both work and personal accounts, and once their personal laptop is infected, you can find out that your work Chrome profile is shared across all environments, and stealers now can even get your corporate credentials from a personal laptop if it's not configured properly. So phishing and submission are still very significant, and it's interesting to see that all sorts of speed phishing methods are being used, including voice generation. There are also many users in the region who are looking for pirated software and free content, making them vulnerable to fake sites. Additionally, specialized mobile apps are created to trick people into installing malicious code using drive-by and watering hole techniques. I recommend reading the M-Trends report prepared by Google Threat Intelligence this year. It's really cool stuff with a lot of statistics. And I personally like the information on the average dwell time adversaries spend from reconnaissance to kind of impact phase. The change over the last 5 years is dramatic. It's now a matter of a week, not months, and in many cases even less. However, recalling the case with the Microsoft M365 breach this year, the actors stayed undetected in the environment for 3 months, so it depends. So this 9 days time frame highlights how automated the threat actors' arsenal has become and how easy it is to use these tools for them. If you recall the initial access techniques for APAC as shown before, you'll see a similar pattern here. So I've cherry-picked a few countries, and Pakistan is one of this. Here we have phishing is at the top, followed by exploiting vulnerability and the use of valid accounts. This suggests that awareness and email protection could be important security measures. Overall, the MITRE map looks simpler than many other cases. It doesn't mean that you don't need to, protection. It just means that attackers do not need to use sophisticated methods to achieve their results. As you see, the number of techniques used by threat actors is relatively low. Attacks are not yet commercialized as as much as in other countries, and where ransomware and data extortion are more prevalent in the impact phase. The picture for Indonesia shows a greater variety of techniques being used in the initial access, defense, evasion, discovery, and impact tactics. This suggests that investments in cybersecurity for the country should be on the rise, as we see attackers increasingly interested in targeting victims with some level of sophistication here. Complexity in the in Australia's MITRE attack map continues to rise compared to the other two we just mentioned. There are more methods being used to execute malware, still many defense evasion techniques similar to those in Indonesia. However, the command control phase involves more techniques: content injection, data encoding, obfuscation, dynamic resolution, multi-stage channels, proxies, and so on. So attackers are aware that some Australian firms have invested in ransomware protection measures, such as effective backup systems for quick recovery. As a result, attackers not only focusing on data encryption, but also on extortion and inhibiting system recovery by forcibly deleting backups. So check again how easily your backup systems could be accessed. As we mentioned regarding initial access techniques and some of the most significant breaches, stealers play a key role in it. So for instance, credential stuffing is an easy way to access a valid account without needing to pay for a private RC exploit. Many of the top stealers worldwide are relevant to the APAC market. For example, Luma and SteelC stealers are amongst the most prevalent. Some of the top stealers were created before the concept of info stealers even existed. But many are quite new. In the region, many people download pirated content and seek ways to install software and games, which leads to the installation of stealers, resulting in their sensitive data being leaked and sold. Stealers are cheap, can be used at scale, and often come bundled with loaders and other malware. This allows black market developers to cross-sell and support each other. So it's quite a strong market. But there's still space for new entrants, as we saw with this stealer that emerged in 2024, utilizing Telegram as an easy and effective C2 mechanism while being distributed from GitHub while malvertising. So when you Google something, fake Google ads being shown. So the APAC threat landscape is complex with many players from different countries. Numerous groups are emerging within the region, including new financial motivated actors who are either cheap to hire in less developed countries or technically skilled enough to carry out serious campaigns. So we're expecting more ransomware attacks in the APAC, and the use of stealers should be a popular method of intrusion. Okay, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
We have a beautiful conversation in the chat.
Yep.
Yeah, that we should have a Gartner quadrant for stealers.
Yeah. Actually, it could be cool.
And yeah, Arnold and Chan accepted that they saw the spike of this types of attack in the environment. So I think we should go further to Ryann, and he will discuss how threat intelligence can raise ROI of cybersecurity solutions.
Let me just share my screen. Right, share. Let me know once you can see my screen.
Yeah, all good.
Cool. All right, let me just grab this, make sure I can see everybody's beautiful faces. Beautiful. All right, so hello everyone. So Ryann Lofamia, head of a cybersecurity practice here in Australia. So today or tonight, wherever you, depending on where you're based, I'll be talking more about, as the subject suggests. So it's all about understanding and uncovering how threat intelligence helps your security operations, right? So from an ROI perspective. So I'll start by setting the stage, I guess, and take a few minutes to explain what ROI means, or return on investment, in the context of a security operation. So typically when we think of ROI, we tend to associate it with profitability, right? Essentially, how much profit can you gain from your investment? But in the context of security operations, ROI has a different focus. It has a different meaning, really, when you say ROI, when you assess the value of your threat intelligence operations. It's more about an organization's ability to prevent or mitigate the financial impact of a cyber attack, minimizing the operational and financial damage caused by such incidents. So that's really the goal, right? It's not to make more money, obviously. It's about how do you make sure that your business stays running when you get a cyber attack. So in simple terms, the more effective your security operations is at preventing or limiting the financial consequences of cyber attacks, the higher your ROI will be, right? So I'll show you on the next slide on what that means, actually. But just to quickly recap, ROI in the context of security operations is about building cyber resilience and limiting the blast radius of cyber attacks and its impact on your business operations. So with that basic understanding in place, I'll move on to the next slide where I'll share some more data points to illustrate this better. Here we go. So the data here is a bit dated, but I feel like it's still relevant. So this data come from ASD, or Australian Signals Directorate. They publish threat reports every year, and this is actually from their threat report last year, financial year 22 and 23. I think they should be releasing the new one anytime soon. I think end of year. November is usually when they publish it. But yeah, so on the top left, you'll see the average cost of a single cyber attack across small, medium, and large businesses. So this data, in my opinion, is invaluable when evaluating the ROI of security operation, and they will vary depending on your organization size, right? But the fact that you've got a entity like ASD that has access to lots of information and they can publish this, I feel like this is a shortcut, easy way of understanding what is the ROI when you're building a security operations capability. So this is what a business could potentially lose in a single cyber attack, just to emphasize single cyber attack. So this is the average. So imagine if you got two of this. So a small business taking 46,000 hit. Yeah, I can't imagine many businesses would survive that. What else? So the other data points here, like the top 3 cyber crime types, the 23% increase in reported attacks. This just adds color to the evolving threat landscape, specifically here in Australia, right? So the key takeaway here is that the threat to business is very real, and it's crucial for organizations to invest on proactive and reactive security operations. It's one thing that you've got threat intelligence that helps you sort of get ahead of the curve, but at the same time, you should also be investing on proactive. Like you should have proper security controls in the first place, right? So if you do get compromised, or you should be avoiding to get compromised in the first place, right? So focus on proactive and reactive security operations. Now, let's set that aside. That was just to provide some data points and some context on the main topic. So if we put that aside for a moment and then break down how cyber attacks cause financial damage to organizations, we'll keep it very high level. Obviously, each organizations are different. A similar cyber attack, for example, can have a very different impact from one organization to another. There will always be nuances. So we'll just keep this very high level and just keep them generic. So the first one is what we'll call indirect financial impact. So these are cyber attacks that don't immediately halt your operations, but they do damage your reputation, which then indirectly affects your bottom line. So a typical example is data breach. So depending on the volume and the sensitivity of the compromised data, this type of attack can make customers and your business partners question your ability to safeguard their information, leading them to take their business elsewhere. So as you can imagine, when your sensitive information is mishandled or exposed, stakeholders may doubt your reliability. And the way you respond to a cyber attack and manage communications with stakeholders becomes very crucial, often determining whether your customers and partners stay or leave. So this has indirect, because of that very, obviously it's, I wouldn't say very small, but it doesn't stop your business operations, but it's about your reputation. So nobody wants to deal with you anymore because of an incident happened. You know, you mishandled information, or data exfiltration happened, and then so this is especially for what I'm finding is especially for those what I would call utilization providers, your telco, stuff like that, right? So I won't mention names, but yeah, those are the industries that gets impacted by this kind of attack most of the time, and how their customers react to those incidents. So another example is a short-lived service disruption, such as denial of service attacks, which limit your ability to provide services even after recovery. The perception of unreliability, even if it's a short time, can tarnish your reputation, which then over time will dry up your business if you don't manage it properly. So that's one. So that's what we'll call indirect financial impact. So obviously there's a lot more of example, but we can't cover it because we have limited time here. So that's one example. And the other category really is your direct financial impact. These are attacks that go straight to your operation and stops you from running, right? So one classic example is ransomware, as we all know. So ransomware will disrupt operations directly, depending on which system gets compromised. It will lock down system. You'll be suffering significant downtime depending on the criticality of that asset. And worst is the damage doesn't stop there, because some threat actors will actually take it to the next level. So on top of locking in your system, encrypting it, they can actually do data exfiltration and then threaten you with data leak, right? So it goes back to that indirect financial impact. So your system is down, and then your data is out in the wild. So that's one of the challenges in there. So yeah, so these are the two main ways cyber attacks affect businesses, through indirect and direct financial impact. So now the question is, how does threat intelligence fit into this picture, right? So in my view, threat intelligence is crucial for maximizing ROI in security operations, because it narrows down the scope of work and enhances your other capabilities, assuming you've got other functions, right? You've got threat monitoring, you got threat hunting, incident response, detection engineering. Threat intelligence then sorts of drive all of the focus on specific and relevant areas of threats to your group, to your organization, right? So that's where threat intelligence comes in really handy. But even if you don't have those functions, threat intelligence still provides value. Because, for example, if you have a firewall, you can add a threat intelligence feed in there, and then quickly you have more context on what's going through your network, right? So you've got more visibility. So threat intelligence, again, just to quickly summarize, it enhances and allows your team to focus on what matters the most. So rather than chasing every potential threat, an effective threat intelligence operations provides insight into the threats that's most relevant to your organization, right? This means focusing on threat actors and campaigns that targets your industry, your region, specific areas of your digital infrastructure that's unique, well, not unique to you, but we'll just call it attack surface, right? So every organization will have a specific profile of technologies, so that may be unique to you. So you need to understand what your attack surface looks like. So by leveraging threat intelligence, you gain an understanding of this targeted threats, which means you can then allocate resources more efficiently, ensuring your team focuses on the risk most likely to impact your organization. So this makes your detection, prevention, and response efforts more precise and proactive. And as a result, your security measures becomes more effective, reducing the likelihood of costly incidents and ultimately improving your ROI. So in conclusion, in closing, in my opinion, integrating threat intelligence into your security strategy isn't just about defending against cyber attacks. It's about making smarter, data-driven decisions on where to focus your efforts, protecting your organization's bottom line, and eventually increasing the return on your security investments. That's it for me. Did we have any questions while I was talking? No.
No.
I have one now, if you want.
Yep. Yeah, let's do it.
How do you see the adoption of methodologies like open fair for MSP providers to kind of encourage their customers to essentially quantify the potential risk of specifically a attack vector? Is it something that it's already widely used and adopted, or like you still get some sort of eyebrows when you when you mention it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it really depends, right? So, but yeah, to quickly answer that, I think there's still a lot of catching up to do, and this is where the MSP and service providers can come in, right? So instead of forcing organizations to adapt a specific framework or a specific methodology, because you then have to invest on your people to understand that, train them, make sure that you've got policies that supports that framework or methodology. Rather than doing that, the MSSPs can actually sell that as a service as part of their, or bundle that in their service. So the customers then are just buying an outcome, and the methodology is part of that, right? So I feel like, to answer your question, there's still a lot of work, but MSSPs can do a better job by bundling this into their offering and lowering the barrier to entry for this methodology. But yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great.
I'm going to stop sharing. Over to you, Anna.
Yeah, I think we are moving on. Alexander Gould, he will he will give us insights on how to use MITRE framework to help to understand attack pathways and threat landscape and how to work within it. So Alexander, up to you.
Can you guys hear me? Apologize if there's a bit of background noise. I'm at an airport waiting for a
Oh,
flight.
good.
Is my screen shared? Can you guys see my screen?
I don't think
yet.
so.
No.
Share. How
Oh
about
yeah,
now?
comes.
Oh, great. Cool. So what I'll be talking about today is leveraging cyber threat intel in order to defend against advanced persistent threats. But I think more widely too, it's going to be looking at. It was interesting seeing the chat question about how everybody's part. The intel predominantly seems to be part of the SOC team. So I've been fortunate to work in multiple organizations where threat intel was a dedicated function, and it can go both ways. When threat intel is a dedicated function, sometimes we find ourselves having to justify, and then I think that really ties in well with Ryan's talk about that ROI for cyber threat intelligence. We've had to justify, and this what I'm about to go into, whilst it's a practical application of cyber threat intelligence and how I do threat intelligence, it will also tie into how that intelligence feeds into a lot of the other teams. I think the biggest thing that I've learned with my time in Intel, coming both from a cyber background and also military background, is I think fundamentally intelligence is for a consumer. It's for a stakeholder. It's not for yourself, and that's something that when producing intelligence products we need to understand, because you could think that something's the coolest thing in the world, but if nobody can take that and take that piece of intelligence or information and then it enables the action of another team, then your intelligence has effectively failed. So with that, let's jump straight into it. So today I'll be looking at how we utilize cyber threat intel in order to enhance APT defense. We'll look at the key steps to apply these CTI methods in security operations and the bigger picture of how it flows into the other cyber teams. And we'll be using APT40 as an example to demonstrate the practical CTI applications. So why CTI matters in defending against APT? So long-term, firstly, APT characteristics, their long-term focus, their strategic focus, very well resourced, typically speaking, and also very mature in terms of their capability. On top of the resourcing, they're also very capable, and they can sit in organizations for a long time. So they're not just looking to pop an organization, they're looking to strategically place themselves, which can make it even more difficult to detect, because they don't want to be detected and they're happy to sit there for months, for years. And therefore we have to work up that pyramid of pain a bit further in order to detect APTs. And this is why I think this method can work well. Where CTI comes in, we're looking at providing actionable intelligence for adversarial behaviors, as I was saying before. And by providing actionable intelligence, we're enabling proactive defense for our defenders because we're able to anticipate our threats and also mitigate against these threats to reduce their effects. Key benefits of CTI when applied properly, we can provide actionable intelligence, so enabling other teams. We have that proactiveness, so instead of being reactive to things happening, we can stay ahead of the curve before we're right of bang. We can also enhance our incident response. I think nowadays it's not a question of if, but a question of when we're going to get popped. And a big part of that is once we do get popped, how quickly we can respond to that incident and bring it under control and reduce the damage that is caused by the threat. I think Ryan already spoke to this, is the better resource allocation.
J2531, service through to Melbourne. If you hold a boarding pass for
That's okay. Just we will wait for a couple of minutes. That's okay.
That's okay.
A quick async exercise to find at what airport Alexander is currently is.
Nice.
So Ryan already spoke about better resource allocation. I always talk about a world of unlimited threats with limited resources. So we're looking at triaging our resources to the greatest effect within the organization. And finally, because CTI needs to take a holistic big picture view of the organizations and the teams available and where we're feeding this intelligence, I think CTI also goes a long way towards increasing that collaboration between teams. So for our scenario, we're going to look at APT-40. In terms of who they are, they've been quite prevalent in Australia recently, and they've also had a few key reports come out. One specifically from the ASD. I've pulled quite a bit from the ASD report, but there's a number of other reports out there as well. They're state-sponsored Chinese espionage group. They target government, critical infrastructure, and defense. They're looking to strategically place themselves in case they need to use it at a later stage. For instance, if a conflict were to break out. APT-40, not only do they represent typical APT behavior, but they're quite sophisticated as well. So this means when they do embed themselves in an environment, it takes a lot of effort and resource to detect them. They're prominent, and they're a good example on how we can illustrate a CTI being applied. So firstly, when I go through my understanding of the environment, I try to understand not just my critical assets, but I do a threat landscape overview of not the external threats, but also internally. We need to look internally and externally. So internally, what is our organization fundamentally trying to protect? So what we have there, the crown jewels. What will stop our organization from functioning? Because everybody thinks that they're important, but then when we actually dig through this, we realize we're going to have to cut. When people say you cut the limb to save the body, for instance. So what are the limbs that we can sort of sacrifice in order to protect those critical assets? I think another big one too that's come out more recently is our supply chain dependencies. So we need to look at understanding not just our own organization, but what are our vendors, what are our partners. And some recent examples being Boeing. They were pretty well protected, but the way that threat actors were able to get into Boeing, for instance, was through the third-party supply chain. They found a weaker link in the chain, or were able to move laterally, and then into the organization. So by understanding internally, we can then start to develop a picture of our broader threat landscape, because we understand what we're trying to protect, what our organization about, our area within.
Hi everyone, once again, this is
country.
the final call for any Jetstar passengers travelling at J2531, 6:30 p.m. departure through to Melbourne. If you hold a boarding pass for this service,
figure it out.
I hope this is not your plane. Because it's final call.
No, all good, man. It's actually funny. It's good.
Yeah.
When you hear when you hear Alex Gould over the line, then we'll go, oh yep. Cool. So moving on to the next step. So yep, step one, identifying our critical assets and what it is we're trying to protect. Only once we understand ourselves as an organization and what it is we're trying to defend, do we then move on to identifying the APTs? And I think that's a really important distinction to make, because I've worked with teams, I've worked with organizations before where they jump straight to the fancy tools and looking at every single APT, and the amount of times as well that I've had clients go, oh, cool, like, you know, this what about this APT? It's important as CTI analysts to help our stakeholders understand, and for us to contextualize for them, you know what, like, you don't need to be looking at every threat. You only need to be looking at the threats that are relevant to you, that are targeting. So we have, so a big part of my work I've found is actually helping to contextualize. No, we don't need to be looking at this. We need to be looking at this based on our own profile and what a threat would actually want to target. So step 2 is that identify the adversaries. APT 40 in this example, you know, they're motivated by espionage, gaining the strategic advantage over other states, and using sophisticated and custom tooling in order to breach organization and strategically place themselves within those organizations, either for data exfiltration or for further down the line when they might want to use it, for instance, if a conflict was to occur. So CTI here allows us to do profile deep dives, understand the motivations and the capabilities of the adversaries. And at this point, we'll also start to think about how we map out so our organization, what we're trying to protect, and we start to map out the adversaries against our assets, against the data, the information that we're trying to protect within our organization. Tools I typically use, you know, threat intelligence platforms. So any sort of open source threat intelligence platform generally can work just as well. Our open source tools like MITRE, and then open source reporting. I think the big one I want to take.
Everyone, this next minute is any passengers traveling in Jetstar flight JQ5293 to Melbourne.
I swear it was quiet
This
before.
service, please make your way through to gate match 49.
He's definitely not going to Melbourne.
So the big thing that I've found is when I've been to some organizations, like, they think they need, you know, the most fancy tools, most expensive tools, the best data sets in order to start CTI. But a lot of some of the good CTI they've done has been using open source tools, open source reports, open source data, and then that final step may be using that closed source data. But with open source now, there's so much available to us. I think CTI teams, and even SOC teams, shouldn't think they're incapable of doing high quality CTI. All you really need is that keen analyst that is able to, you know, be what I like to call a bloodhound, is to go down those rabbit holes and investigate and explore, and have that curious mind to conduct these sort of analyses. All right, so from identifying our adversaries, what I then move on to is mapping those TTPs using the MITRE ATT&CK Framework. So going up the pyramid of pain, I think gone are the days of just using IOCs, because IOCs are now so easy to just for a threat to change, and also sometimes it's shared among other adversaries, which also makes it hard to fingerprint which threat is targeting us. We want to start looking more at TTPs in order to target.
Also urgently paging the following fields for passengers for Jetstar flight JQ531 or service through to Melbourne.
This person needs to go to his plane.
So much. Mr. Jane Rashand and Mr. Jashandeep
I think she sensed that you're in a
Please make
meeting
your way
and
immediately
she's
to
doing
gate
it
match
deliberately.
54. As the final
I
passengers
think so.
to board this flight and offloading procedures have commenced.
Personal data has been announced.
Yep. So looking at mapping adversary TTPs, why this is an effective step. So firstly, visualizations. I love visualizations, especially for non-technical people. And in today's world in cyber, we're no longer just working, you know, with highly technical individuals. We're also working with non-technical individuals as well. So, and being able to visualize data information helps us better tell the story that we want to achieve with the intelligence that we're providing. So this helps us visualize how adversaries operate across different attack paths, and also draws our attention to what we need to focus on, which leads into prioritization. It also aligns our detection mitigation efforts based on the common TTPs that have identified within the heat map, and we'll go more into that in the next step. Finally, for threat hunting and testing, now we can guide the threat hunting exercise and pen testers. Again, we'll go more into this in the next steps there. In terms of how we do this step, so once we've identified our adversaries, Now, reports are generally pretty good in terms of providing the TTPs and mapping them to MITRE, but I remember back in the day having to read through a report and read through the words and pull out, you know, the TTPs within that report as they weren't listed in the report. But I think it's becoming pretty standard now where TTPs of threats are listed in those reports, so people can go and apply them to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So this uses a number of CTR reports and threat feeds, and then from there we map the TTPs to MITRE ATT&CK. We match each adversary, and then from there we map the TTPs out, and we're able to build out the heat map. Once we've built up the heat map, what I then do is build a viable attack pathway using what we've understood. So looking at our own infrastructure, looking at the adversary's capabilities and toolings, we'll build out what we think could be potential attack pathways of the adversary. So how they're going to gain that initial access, or what kind of reconnaissance they might conduct, where they're going to move within the network, what they're going to target within that network, and if they're going to extract, what they're going to be extracting, and also those evasion techniques, so that we can improve our detection because we know how they're going to be evading us. From there, we're able to go and apply, look at the detection and mitigations based on the pathways that we've identified. So I use MITRE, I go in there and I pull out the mitigations and the detections. I'll talk more about in the next slide on how we can then use this for the different teams. I think this is where it all comes together. So after going through all those steps, we can now produce threat intelligence that we can provide to multiple stakeholders. At a high level, we can provide an understanding of the threat landscape to our business executives, what the risk is to them, and where they should be investing their resources in order to better protect the network, protect the environment, protect their data, and the users. For security engineering teams, we can help them identify the TTP for them, and we've also pulled out the mitigations and the detections, so we can get engineering teams to then build in those detections, build in those mitigations to better be protected. For incident response teams, because we've identified the attack pathways, we've narrowed down where the incident response teams will be looking when it is right of bang, so they're not searching for everything. We've got a set of TTPs that have already been identified. And this also can go into wargaming as well, where we can assist the incident response teams in wargaming. For threat hunting teams, it allows them to search for those TTPs and indicators that the adversaries might be using. And finally, for the pen testing teams, it allows them to simulate the real world attacks based on the attack pathways that we've identified for them. And they can do it, and then they'll do this after the security engineering teams have gone in and applied those detections and mitigations. In conclusion, CTI enables proactive defense against APTs. So through actionable intelligence, proactive threat management, enhanced incident response, better resource allocation, increased collaboration. That covers me.
I think I've got one question. Should we match this heat map that we got from our internal research with heat maps for country heat maps that was mentioned by Yury in the first presentation? Of TTP heat maps, I mean.
Yep. Yeah, so we build heat maps all the time. Every time we do a threat profile, we'll build a heat map for the threat, and we also do country and...
Wait, I love how Zoom actually adjusts the micro volume to this loud voice.
So everyone knows who's the boss, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So I do it for both. So when we do it for both. We'll break it up into region, country, industry, and we'll just have a whole threat library of everything ready to go. We'll have multiple dashboards ready to go that are built off these heat maps. And I guess that's just because we work with lots of different organizations. So it's easy for us to quickly pull up that when, there is an incident that has occurred, we're able to quickly go, cool, what are the threats targeting this industry in this region? And we can quickly narrow down, okay, it could be this threat, it could be this threat, and then provide those TTPs. And while the heat map originally allowed us to build all this out, it also allows us to bring that heat map and provide it back to the teams as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. I cannot see other questions, so I think we're now moving on to Paolo. He will discuss about CTI sharing efforts.
Yes, perfect. Okay, share. This one. Okay, so I'm Paolo. Thanks for Yury for the introduction. This presentation, I want to provide more like a summary of experiences that I learned during threat sharing, and also a new way, or let's say principled approach to improve threat sharing, rather than just talking about tools and technologies, because there are a lot of them. So yeah, just as Yury said before, I'm a software engineer and ethical hacker. I've been working in cybersecurity for some time, and I had the pleasure of working for large enterprises like Fortinet and Microsoft, doing like threat intelligence sharing and operations. Also with big customers on the private sector, but also on the public sector. And I also like open source, so I contribute to several of those initiatives that you can see there. So one of them I want to mention EPSS, the exploit prediction scoring system. I also contribute to STIX 2.1 by Oasis, which is probably everybody knows that it's a protocol and standard to share threat intelligence objects. And also, I work for the on projects from the MITRE Ingenuity Foundation. So when I was working as a kind of senior lead for Cyber Threat Alliance, this was within Fortinet. That was one of the founding members of this threat sharing initiative. Technically, it was a non-profit initiative, and there were around 31 vendors, obviously from the kind of NATO friendly, that kind of were interested in sharing threat intelligence. There were also like some ISPs from multiple countries, which added some nice visibility into like more like consumer threats, from home subscriptions or like business lines. And what we did, which was kind of very interesting, was to design a scoring system to kind of encourage every member in this group to share new indicators rather than feeding out-of-date, like well-known IOCs. And there was also kind of a way to push them to get more point if you were climbing the pyramid of pain. So if you were sharing like TTPs, techniques or procedures from the MITRE framework, you will get like top brownie points. If you were just sharing some static indicators like file URLs, you will get far less points. However, yeah, like not everything is perfect. We had several challenges. One was to onboard more, let's say, customers or members, because although it was technically a non-profit organization, every member did to pay a subscription fee, which it was it wasn't too expensive, but for a smaller company like an SMB, they probably couldn't afford it. But also like every member in that group had to contribute. So actively, I don't know why my slides are moving. Every member in that group should actively push essentially data, and there was no consumption only mode. There was also one of the problems, despite this scoring system, was that we unfortunately a lot of companies or members were still pushing these kind of usual indicators like file, URL, IP addresses. So the variety was very narrow, so despite our scoring system. And also one of the issues was that a lot of companies or members were like automating feeds, from their telemetry or maybe sandboxes. And if there was an issue, like somebody made a mistake or there was like suddenly some sort of noise in their detections, within 24 hours before everybody would realize that, you would be flooded by dirty indicators, right? And that was kind of a big issue because you have to go and clean it up and sort of ignore all those kind of IOCs. So in terms of law enforcement agencies, I had the pleasure to work with entities like Interpol, but also other ones, the three-letter agencies. And on one side, this was great. It was kind of a high-stake environment where you could actually impact the attacker, with takedowns, botnets, and C2 with the private sector and the government, wherever the attack was originating. And of course, I'm sure you can see sometimes in the news, that could lead to jail sentences and asset seizures. So you can actually impact, the actual criminals behind the keyboard. Of course, on the other side, it was kind of a challenge because in many ways they will be very one-sided. So they will send you an RFI, and you will just essentially send you have to send that report, and you will never get any feedback. So it was very hard to understand if it was good or bad, the information that was provided. There was a lot of red tape. So before disclosing any sort of reports, you'll have to talk to legal to make sure that there wasn't any sort of information that wasn't allowed to be shared or from customers, let's say that. And also going to court is not fun. This wasn't a personal experience, but some investigators had to go to court to provide forensic evidence because the cyber criminals had lawyered up. So they were so powerful that they could actually bring you to court, even though they were very well known, in the news. And in one occasion, the actual good guys, from the investigation was put quite a hard situation that it couldn't work anymore because they found ways to to sort of fight back the actual court case. So that wasn't very fun. So we talk about the Australian ASD Signal Directorate, and when you go on the public sector, so when you go in the kind of a government level, we've seen like worldwide some interesting initiatives. So like pretty much in UK with the National Cybersecurity Center, and in US the KISA or CISA agency, they kind of do the same thing, right? So they have a security hotline which you can contact in case of an incident. They publish alerts, technical advice, advisories, notifications, and they also establish partnership that support sharing and onboarding between cross-country or across let's say nations. Despite that, and as we have seen in a previous slide, unfortunately, cybercrime reports are increasing. There's a 23% increase, hotline calls 32%, and the average cost of cybercrime per report increased by 14%. The amount of vulnerability are increasing year by year. We have a similar figure that you can find in the EPSS report, and that could be the reason could be that we have simply more software that is more widely available, mobile, 5G, and whatever. But the reality why this is still not good enough. So one issue is that even with something as simple as vulnerability reporting, we have a quite fragmented framework. We have several database sources. I'm sure everybody is aware of the NIST situation now that got funding denied to support the CV database. But they're also like, there's Google, they have their own thing. Microsoft did their own thing. Then there is MITRE and the CV database. It's very hard to link them together. Like publishing CVs is actually insufficient because, yeah, as we know, like even though like they're published very quickly, let's say, you know, within hours or in some cases, like let's say, you know, minutes or hours, still we have seen exploitation way beyond the kind of acceptable metrics. You know, 6 years, ASD have seen exploitation after 6 years of publication. And so, yeah, 49% of exploit occur well afterward. Even if you look in Australia, so they have 250 threat intelligence partners that receive IOCs electronically. But that's, if you think statistically, that's just a tiny part of the Australian companies, you know, 0.03%. And Red Spies now, which is a kind of a new initiative, I love that name, that is kind of trying to encourage this concept of act defense. And this is something very interesting. It's a 9.9 billion project. What they're doing is putting more people behind, you know, these SOC centers, more technology, access to AI, machine learning, you know, more sort of presence worldwide. And probably we'll see the effect of this, you know, within multiple years, maybe, you know, 3 to 5 years. But if you look at currently, like worldwide, we're still losing. And the main the main question everybody's asking, like, why, you know, why this is happening? Do we need more technology? Do we need to train more people? You know, what's you know, what do we need, like, to do this, you know, besides money, right? So you can put a lot of money, but if you don't know how to use it, it's pointless. And in my personal experience, what I've seen, it's not the technology or people, okay, processes maybe. It's more about the philosophy or like you know, changing the way we think about threat intelligence. And if you look at the kind of animal world, my children love alpaca, so I put that picture there. You know, like the way we have to approach this is to kind of herd immunity, right? So if you change your vision or goal in a way that you feel part of a group that needs to defend themselves, and the only strategy really to win from you know, from modern attacks is to be as fast as you can. So you have to share both ways. You have to collaborate. And so if some of the kind of businesses or entities in your network or your group gets compromised, you have to be really fast to explain and teach everybody else what they should be doing, right? So what I call this, it's air defense. Obviously, it's nothing new. Like it exists in medicine, epidemiology, and you know, in other sort of industries. But you know, I don't think we are doing this good enough. So like the way you can practice this, it can be either like at a country level or like within an industry vertical. It doesn't have to be like you know, super big. So you can start small. In this example, I just mentioned Australia because yeah, we are in the APAC region. So we already know, like, you know, we have a lot of frameworks for threat intelligence, life cycle, and whatnot. So you know, there are 6 steps. You have to make sure that everybody authenticates, so to make sure that you're not sharing information with the enemy. You know, like you have to gather information, you have to disseminate it as fast as you can, share it, collect it, and collaborate. And the key point is to use the same language. So like you have to use these standards because without standards, it's like, you know, everybody's speaking a different language, and it becomes really inefficient from a head group perspective to react. So what's the secret there? I mean, there are, as I mentioned before, there are tools and protocols, but the key point here is really like two. One is cost. You know, we talked about ROI before. So how much money you're spending in these tools, and vendors, they like to build their own castles. So every vendor, they have their own ecosystem. But like, you know, to practice this kind of concept of herd defense, you really have to have vendors to share and use these kind of protocols. But also there's a lot of open source and free tools. that every member in that group needs to adopt, because otherwise, especially SMBs and the SMEs won't be able to share this invaluable intelligence, because they don't have the money to buy some expensive tool, and they simply don't do it, right? So if we look at the kind of more from a technical perspective, I usually think of this in 4 levels, which can be seen as a level of complexity. So it's kind of the basics. So like threat intelligence and the capability of incident management. So we know there are standards like STIX and TAXII. We have the MITRE ATT&CK Framework. We have OSCAL and the various standard for incident response. Hopefully, most companies, I mean, obviously I'm being ironic, but this should be the kind of basic denominators that everybody should be using. But then if you go up, you look into vulnerability standards, so that enables you to understand how vulnerabilities and CVs are evolving. So yeah, we have the NIST CV database, OpenSSF, and now EPSS as a scoring system. But then if you want to go up again and you want to sort of automate vulnerability and sharing like attack vectors and why you're vulnerable, you have to look into these new frameworks like CSAF, VEX, SPDX, which is a SPOM standard, and or Cyclone DX to be able to essentially tell other people what kind of combination of software you've been using in that during that kind of attack. And then tier 4 is like what now we have this kind of capability of sharing playbooks in an open format. So we have a threat hunting language, which is Castro. We have these Cacao playbooks, and we have OpenC2 for orchestrating other products. So all the kind of tools are there if you think of layering that cake. And if you think about this inverted pyramid, as I mentioned before, you want to start from IOCs, which are very ephemeral. Then you go into sightings and threat reports, which are more like on a pattern level. Then you have behaviors like attack flow and the upcoming IOB. But then, if you go like level 2, level 3, level 4, you can really start to play really hard and, start to apply automatic mitigations, countermeasures, safeguards, and really go fast and mitigate and respond to beat the attacker. It's all kind of a game of speed, really. There is no secrets, and the more you walk through this pyramid, so going on the top, the more you will be effective in defending from the bad guys. So I want to make an example. This obviously doesn't exist, kind of an ideal example of how this could flow. This doesn't have to be Australia, it's just an example. But let's say you have a school that is using some sort of free open source tool like Sigma or Yara detection with like an open CM or EDR like Elasticsearch. They get compromised. They sort of understand what control was violated. Maybe it was a weak password, or maybe it was an unpatched vulnerability. They produce a quick report through one of these open source tools. Maybe they don't have the entire picture because they don't have capabilities, but they can call their MSP to investigate. The MSP can figure out the attack vector, what kind of CVE was used. They can produce a CSAF package to kind of figure out what part of that software compromised. They can produce a sighting paired with a SBOM, like for that specific school. And then the MSP can do a remediation, so they can figure out what that school should do to keep attacker out and to kind of clean their systems and patch a vulnerability. That was the case. If the MSP doesn't have enough capability, they can call the virtual SOC, which is the national SOC center, like AST in that case. They can build a joint task force where they can cooperate to kind of expand the kind of pieces of that puzzle. They can then produce a full report, which includes STIX, varies, Cocoa playbooks, the CSAF, and the attack flow. And then in terms of prevention, they can basically tell all the other schools to execute that playbooks to immunize themselves or to be ready for similar attacks in the future, and basically tell what kind of steps they have to follow for be proactive, which it's something that it's called the Essential 8, but it can be any other framework that you can use. So all of this is great, of course, but there are a lot of challenges, and this is something I kind of learned from experience. And obviously, one is kind of privacy. So a lot of companies or entities are afraid of sharing too much threat intelligence because they think it might be used against them in the future. Or there could be some legal requirements by which if you disclose a breach, you're liable. So you will have a kind of a fine by your local regulator, or it can be like, unfortunately, cyber insurance can go and increase your premium because maybe that was part of your policy. But the good news is that there are ways that you can sort of enforce guarantees of privacy when you're sharing like indicators or TTPs or any kind of artifacts. There are three main technologies that I've used before, and I gave some conference talks. One of them is multi-party computation. The other one is differential privacy. And the third one is homomorphic encryption. And they can all be used in combination or in isolation to enable you to share indicators or artifacts for only a specific purpose. So that, like, if you have shared your indicator for, let's say, a firewall deployment rule, that stays within that system, so you can't you can't use that for any other purposes. Or if you're sharing like the amount of let's say vulnerabilities that were discovered in your environment, you don't have to provide all the kind of details, the detailed information about when and what system was compromised, but you can only share some statistical aggregates. And then the companies within your group or peers can ask more details if they're interested. So yeah, there are a lot of technologies, and maybe we can talk about this in a future talk, because they are quite complex to explain and deploy. But my takeaway from today is that every time you go into you're creating or you're joining a threat intelligence sharing group, think of it as individually you're weak, but obviously as a group you can make a difference. And to do that, it's all about using these open protocols and free tools to be able to share more effectively. So I think with that, I'm done. And like, if you have any questions, I'm open to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Paolo. Yeah, we have a good comment from Alexander. He mentioned the case when a ransomware group reported a company, to put more pressure on the company.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can make some comments on that one. Yeah. So I think a good example of working on these kind of issues with like the Cyber Threat Alliance was that every time a vendor will discover, let's say, a new vulnerability or a new threat group, they would agree within themselves before the disclosing date, and essentially to allow everybody else to be ready for the kind of announcement. So that means that the other vendors will be protected. They will have the detection, and like nobody will look bad, because obviously if you disclose something and you say, hey, only Cisco, we are really cool, we have the detection, but everybody else is not protected. Of course, the attacker, what they're going to do, oh, nice, new vulnerability, let's go for Palo Alto, let's go for Fortinet. So I think that's one way to protect that. In terms of reputation, I think probably Ryan has more experience in terms of reputational damage. I think, once the genie is out of the box, right? Once somebody get compromised, you're in damage control, and I think as an industry, we had to become better at doing less ambulance chasing. I don't know if that's an expression in the APAC region, but like I know that there are comments like, "Hey, oh, they're really bad. They got compromised." Of course, like they weren't using EDR solution, right? But I think by doing that, like it's like eventually you will get compromised, and like shaming each other, it doesn't really work. Eventually everybody will be in the same situation. And we should be supportive of each other, not just saying, hey, like, oh, they're really bad, their SOC is really bad, like we are better, right? And then maybe you get compromised a couple of months ago. But yeah, that's what I usually suggest. Just be kind to each other.
Yeah, no toxic sharing like this.
Yeah.
I think this idea
Sorry,
Amanta?
Amat here. Yeah, interesting talk. Thanks for that. I was wondering, in terms of intelligence sharing, what sort of incentives are there for like companies to share that with other companies that might be competitors, in terms of who they're dealing with, in terms of the threat actors?
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned before, like when you look at the things like Cyber Threat Alliance, it's kind of political. I mean, there is the geopolitical landscape, of course. Obviously, there was let's say there was an embargo on unfriendly countries, of course. So they wouldn't allow anybody, let's say from China, right? Or Russia, even at that time, to join that membership. So yeah, one is geopolitical, like who is my friend, who is my enemy. The second one is in terms of like let's call it fair competition, like between enterprises. It was kind of interesting. So like when we asked to ask Microsoft to join, they basically say no, because we are great. I mean, I work for Microsoft as well, so they had this, I guess, corporate policy to say that they want to have their own threat sharing program. We only do it for customers. We don't want to be inter-vendor, and they basically say no. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. I think the incentive, the reason why the Cyber Threat Alliance worked well, even there were a lot of competitors between that group, was that people understand that there was different coverages. So like even if you look at the market leaders, like I don't know if now is Cisco or Palo Alto, like they understand they have these coverage issues, like they don't see everything. So for them it's like, well, yeah, maybe I see only 60% of threats, and maybe Cisco sees like 60% of threat, but there is a gap between them. And I can give them something of value, and we can give them something of value, so we can be it's a kind of win-win situation. But I can also tell you the opposite. So there were some companies, I mean, honestly, I don't remember their names, that they joined in, and they didn't see let's say like differential value. So like, hey, I've seen these indicators that that I've already seen this, I'm not interested. So yeah, I think the secret is variety. So as long as you can encourage people to share more different type of indicators, maybe from different industry verticals or geography, everybody's interested, right? Because otherwise, if you're just regurgitating some open source threat intel, nobody's going to join, right? It's like, well, I can get it from Twitter, I can get it from some open source. And also, this is going to be long, but also it's very important quality. So quality versus volume. If we have a threat intel partner that actually have people, like a threat intel team that reviews and validate their indicators, like in the pyramid of pain, is actually less high quality, low volume is actually preferred to, like, oh, I'm going to give you 100,000 IPs, maybe they're malicious, I'm not so sure, and that gets very noisy very fast, and people usually get discouraged when they see that, because it's like, yeah, I don't want to spend time reviewing all of that, right? So I think the kind of human supervision is key when you do that.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think there needs to be like a cultural shift to making everyone comfortable sharing intelligence, because it should be beneficial for everyone. Yeah.
Correct.
Thanks.
100%.
Thanks for that.
Perfect.
Actually, Adam asked about some like comments on the EPSS project. Maybe you can give your like comments about
Okay.
how it is useful. Yeah.
Yeah. So EPSS project. I'll put the just name so people can maybe Google it. So it was really a way to make, let's say, CVSS more data driven. And like I'm sure, like if you've done vulnerability prioritization, unfortunately, yeah, what most people do with CVSS is they basically say, oh, high score, you know, if he's a 10, okay, I have to, you know, that's top of my mind. If he's 1, okay, maybe I don't care. But yeah, people have discovered there's more nuances to that. So first of all, the prevalence of that CV number, it's not really taken into account. So what EPSS does is to actually collect exploitation activity data from multiple vendors and use that real activity, so of let's say pre-exploitation, to kind of tell you how popular is one CV, right? So if there is a CV that is like released and is going crazy, like Log4j. I mean, Log4j was mental. I remember it went like hockey stick within a few days worldwide. You know, there was activity everywhere. You know, you should really prioritize that. If it's in an environment, you should. It's actually being exploited, right? But then on top of this kind of activity-based metric, we data mined things like GitHub repositories, like the actual code of the exploit. Other sources like, I think even Twitter was in one of those sources. But you know, like things like the CV, CWE descriptors. So kind of all the metadata around that vulnerability. And the entire point of this machine learning model was to essentially try to predict the exploitation of a given CVE within the next 30 days, right? So if you think about it in terms of a prediction problem, what you want to tell your user is that what's the likelihood of a new CVE with certain properties to be exploited within, let's say, a week or 30 days, so that you can then prioritize based on, you know, the actual activity that you expect to see from that one. So it's kind of looking in the past to predict the future and based on this kind of metadata. So like, you know, if you go on the website, there is all sort of statistical measures. So like, you know, how accurate is that? Of course, because, you know, like you don't want to rely on a model that is not accurate. There's also, you know, precision recall metrics. There's a free API, so you can access, you can look up any CV that is published or released. You can see the you know, the scoring system and some metadata. You know, why that, you know, why do we say that is 80%? So I hope it kind of answered your questions. And it's kind of, think of it as a more advanced data-driven CVSS system that is based on real data. And the only way we managed to build that was because at the time I managed to convince the Fortinet team to sort of open that data set. So we had telemetry from multiple products like you know, IPS, the AV, EDR solution. And we could actually see the exploitation activity across the vulnerability landscape, across multiple countries. And it took me a lot of time in paperwork and red tape to be able to publish that information to the first org community. And then basically together we build this kind of it's, if you think about this kind of decision tree, but much more advanced than that one, to you know, to provide this model. So a lot of effort, get convincing vendors to give more data. We are still convincing more vendors to join in this threat intelligence group, because we need to, you know, we need more country visibility, more like industry verticals to push more activity data, right? To build an accurate model.
That's great. So we have one more, the last one, short topic from Ryan. Like, which way should we use in-house CTI function, or like should we go to MSS provider? So Ryan, please.
Sure,
you.
thank you. Let me just grab the sharing from Paolo.
Yeah, I'm going to stop.
Share screen. All right. Let me know once you can see the screen.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, thanks. So I'm conscious of time, so I'll try and be quick with this one. So I'm going to discuss the advantages of running threat intelligence operations internally versus a managed security service provider, or MSSP. So obviously, both approaches offer unique benefits, and choosing the right one really depends on factors like your organization size, your budget, expertise, and strategic priorities. So my aim here is, to break down the strengths, and then you can assess which one is suitable for you. Obviously, each organization are different. You have different priorities. You have different risks. So the goal here is really to just touch on the topic and dissect it a little bit. We're scratching the surface, actually. We're not dissecting it. We're just covering very high level on what the benefits are. I'm sure there'll be more, but yeah, this is just very general observation. So next slide. So the advantages of running threat intelligence operations internally. So let's start with the first point, right? Customization and control. So when you manage your threat intelligence operations internally, you get to fully customize your approach based on your specific risks and needs. So you then have the ability to prioritize threats and intelligence sources that align more with your industry or your geography and unique threat landscape that applies to your profile. So you have the ability to pivot quickly if a new threat, for example, if there's a new threat that emerges that's is very relevant to you, you can then quickly shift your focus from looking at other industry specific threats to this specific threat that's in front of you that's relevant to you. So you have that ability to tell your people, okay, stop doing that, focus on this one. So if you're doing that via MSSP, it can still be done, but it's a lot harder, right? So that's one benefit of running it in-house. And I guess it's not unique to threat intelligence, right? Any security operations that you run in-house, you then have the ability to be granular and control where people focuses on. So the other advantage of doing it in-house is enhanced data security and privacy. I guess that it will depend again on what kind of tools you use. Obviously, if you're using a SaaS product, then some of the data will actually be uploaded to the cloud. So this is very centric on the operation. So it will depend on the tools that you use, right? So, but in general, if you're running it in-house, you then have the ability to control where data goes. If you don't like it going outside the country, so don't use products or SaaS products that goes outside the region. So by handling threat intelligence internally, you keep full control of any sensitive data and insights that you generate. So obviously, once your threat intel analyst has gathered information, you then create new value by creating new threat intelligence analysis or output. And then that is then very sensitive because it's very unique to your profile. So obviously you want to safeguard that and make sure that doesn't just go floating around anywhere. And the other one is integration with existing processes. So an in-house team, if you're running it in-house, you can easily integrate your threat intelligence operations with other security functions, right? So like your incident response, your SOC, and any risk management efforts that you've got. So you can then be more targeted, right? So this integrations allows for faster, more precise response to threats because your team then has direct access to your systems, historical data, and internal context. So it's all about creating a cohesive security posture. So, and then the last point is building internal expertise. So naturally, if you're doing that in-house, that also means that you're investing in your people. So you train them and they stay in there and they gather all of this context about your organization, right? So it helps you build a team of skilled professionals who truly understands your organization's infrastructure, threat landscape, and unique challenges. This not only improves your immediate capabilities, but also contributes to a stronger and more self-sufficient security team in the long run. So that's one advantage. But I know what everybody's thinking. There's also disadvantage with that. So that you then have the burden of running an internal team, training them, and dealing with the revolving door of people coming in and coming out. So I guess, you know, no solution is perfect. So you'll always have advantages and disadvantages. So it really depends on what your priority is. So if your priority is making sure that your data stays within your control and being agile, I guess then running an internal threat intelligence operations is the best way for you to go. So that's that. And the other option is obviously running it via an MSSP. So the natural advantage with running it via MSSP is having access to broader experience and intelligence. So MSSPs typically would have a team of seasoned analysts who tracks global and regional threats around the clock. So this gives you access to a wealth of data and expert analysis that might be hard to replicate with an internal team. So if you're comparing an internal team, you probably would have, you know, two threat intelligence analysts compared to an MSSP. To an MSSP would probably have 8 or 10, or probably even more. So it's really hard to replicate that. So you've got scale if you go via MSSP, right? So they can easily scale up. And then the other natural advantage of MSSP is cost effectiveness. Again, this is not unique to threat intelligence operations. MSSPs are very good with developing solutions that are cost effective. So yeah, just being honest, building an in-house threat intelligence team, it can be very expensive. So you would normally do that if you really have a very unique use case and you can convince the business to invest in that. Because you need to hire skilled analysts, to my point earlier, and then invest in ongoing training and purchase the right tools. But an MSSP can give you access to all of this at a predictable fee. So you're buying an outcome. So you've got a flat fee, or depending on the cost structure of the service that you're buying. But the general idea is MSSPs tend to customize their offerings to make it more budget friendly, right? So especially for smaller organizations, they can scale it down and be nimble and scale it at the right way for it to be affordable. So essentially, you get to leverage shared resources of the MSSP without the capital cost. So that's the biggest advantage for an MSSP running operations at scale. Another one is 24/7 monitoring support. So many MSSPs provide round-the-clock operations, which can be very tough and pricey. Again, it's all about, you know, being practical. So running it 24/7, running threat intelligence operations 24/7 is not for everyone, but there are some organizations that needs to do that. So doing that internally can be very expensive. So this is particularly valuable for those of organizations that don't have global operations but still want to continue continuous coverage. So going with the MSSP, that's easily done, right? So it means someone is always keeping an eye out for new threats and can jump into any action in case there's something that's relevant to your organization. And then scalability sort of covers by point number 2. So MSSPs, fast. Yeah, my script is different, but yeah. So faster deployment and time to value. So MSSP can bring their threat intelligence capabilities online quickly, which is a big advantage when you need immediate coverage, or when you're just when you've just identified a gap in your threat monitoring. So this can be very crucial, right? During periods of increased threat activity, or when you're entering new markets that come with higher cyber risk. So very good use case is through acquisition. So if you need to understand, you know, more about a specific risk that's relevant to that organization that you're acquiring. So you need a quick threat intelligence project or professional service, and then definitely MSSP is the way to go, right? So I guess the question there is, so how do you decide between the two? It really comes down to what your organization values the most. So if your priority is having control, customization, and keeping the data in-house, and if you've got the resources to invest, then definitely building your own team might be the best path. But yeah, it needs more thinking if you're really going to do that, right? So, but if you're looking for cost effectiveness, broader expertise, and scalability, then MSSP is definitely an easy win. And I've seen other organizations, and I think I'm going to go to the next and last slide. So I've seen organizations go in the middle, which is hybrid. So a hybrid approach can be great if it can be a great middle ground between running threat intelligence internally and using an MSSP, because with this strategy, your internal team can then focus on organization-specific threats because they know the environment, they know your risk profile, they know what your attack surface looks like. So leveraging their understanding of your infrastructure, process, and unique factors then makes more sense, right? So they can address nuances of your particular industry and then prioritize threats that have a direct impact on your operations, and then seamlessly integrate threat intelligence into your security functions, such as incident response and SOC activities. So, but on the other hand, and then MSSP, you can then complement that with, so in the hybrid approach, you can then complement that with an MSSP. So the MSSP can then provide a broader perspective that can then help your threat internal team, right? So they provide broader perspective on a global and regional trend. So because they have access to diverse threat feeds, dark web intelligence, and expert analysis. So it helps your organization stay informed about the outer layer of the threat. So not just your high probability threats, but they can focus on the wider scope. So anything that's specific to your region or global, so that they can help with that. So a hybrid model also allows you to maintain flexibility, so you can keep tight control over sensitive data and ensure compliance with any regulatory requirements, right? So if your organization operates in the health sector or government, so you will have those requirements. So you can do that and choose which data stays within your internal team. So you can still work with the MSSP, so you have that advantage of round-the-clock monitoring, but you can pick and choose which data goes where. So this can be, in my opinion, particularly valuable during periods of heightened threat activity or when expanding into new markets where you might need additional support without immediately hiring someone in-house. So you can start with a quick MSSP, and then as you're going through the service, you can start building your own team. So this way, you get the best of both of the solutions. So the precision and control of an internal team, and then combining that with a broader coverage and scalability of an MSSP. So it's a strategy that enables you to tailor your approach to an ever continuously changing threat landscape, and then maximizing the value of your that you get from your security investment. So yeah, so that's it. I hope this helps you understand the strengths of both of these two options. It will really depend on your goals and your objectives and your requirements. So it will take more than 5 or 10 minutes to discuss this, but yeah, that's really a high level, my high level perspective on where to go when it comes to running a threat intelligence operations. Either you do it in-house or MSSP or hybrid. So these are just some of the benefits. That's it from me. Was there any questions?
No, I think that's like everybody is overwhelmed with information. So
Yeah, and we'll be
quite
over time, so
long.
people just left because
Oh
we
yeah,
had
we've gone over time.
other meetings. So yeah.
I
Cool.
will finalize it. So thank you so much to our speakers for sharing such insightful and valuable perspectives today. Your expertise and passion truly made a difference, and we are grateful for the time you've taken to be with us. And to all our attendees, we hope you found the session as enriching as we did. And please keep an eye on our announcements for more exciting events and opportunities. Look forward to seeing you again soon. So on that point, I'm stopping the recording and we are finishing.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a
Thanks,
great
everyone.
rest of your day. Cheers.
Yes.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.